can almost feel it, that uncomfortable silence crawling through Hollywood. A silence that used to be filled with standing ovations, champagne toasts, and glittering smiles on red carpets. Now it's the silence of a collapsing illusion. Tom Hanks, once called America's dad, the gentle face of decency in modern cinema, just broke that silence, and what came out shocked everyone. It wasn't another movie announcement. It wasn't nostalgia for Forrest Gump or Saving Private Ryan. It was a tirade, a frustration that millions of longtime fans, the same people who grew up watching him, have finally had enough. He stood there, almost trembling, trying to defend Hollywood after the chaos that followed the Charlie Kirk assassination, calling the backlash un-American, blaming divisive politics. But the irony? The division came from the very stage he helped build. And what followed wasn't sympathy. It was disbelief. Because when a man who once symbolized integrity becomes the mouthpiece of an industry drowning in arrogance, people start asking, when did the storytellers become the sermonizers? Stay tuned, because this meltdown doesn't end with Hanks. In the next moments, we'll uncover how names like George Clooney, Robert De Niro, and even Disney and Marvel Studios turned Hollywood's golden age into a cultural battlefield, and why independent creators are now the ones rewriting the script. It started like every Hollywood tragedy does, with a headline, a hashtag, and a wave of outrage no one could quite process. The assassination of Charlie Kirk on September 10th didn't just stun political America. It sent shockwaves through the film capital. Within hours, celebrity timelines lit up. Actors, directors, musicians, each one turning grief into a stage performance. Instead of mourning, they were pointing fingers. Instead of unity, they were picking sides. And right in the middle of that digital storm stood Tom Hanks, the man millions once trusted to remind them what decency looked like. He didn't stay silent. He delivered what some are calling the most emotional speech of his career. Only it wasn't scripted by Spielberg or Zemeckis. It was pure frustration. Hanks condemned political hate, accused critics of destroying American art, and pleaded for audiences to stop abandoning Hollywood. But for millions of viewers, that moment was the breaking point. Because this wasn't a humble plea. It sounded like entitlement, a millionaire preaching unity while living behind gates. Comments exploded. "We loved your movies, not your politics." Clips of the speech spread across X, TikTok, and YouTube. Within 24 hours, Boycott Hollywood was trending again. It wasn't just about Hanks anymore. It became a symbol, a moment when the public finally said, enough. And that's where our story truly begins. Because what followed next exposed how deep the rot inside Hollywood really runs, from the echo chambers of Beverly Hills to the boardrooms of streaming giants. The mask of virtue started to crack, and Tom Hanks was standing right at the center of it. When Tom Hanks took the stage that night, he wasn't acting, at least not in the way audiences were used to. His voice quivered, his hands trembled slightly as he spoke about the unfair treatment of Hollywood. He called it a targeted attack on artists, a war against creativity. And for a moment, some people wanted to believe him. After all, this was Forrest Gump himself, the man who once ran across America to remind us that kindness still mattered. But as the camera zoomed in, something felt off. This wasn't humility. It was defensiveness wrapped in moral outrage. He wasn't speaking for the art. He was speaking for the system. The same system that applauds diversity on camera while silencing anyone who disagrees behind the scenes. The same industry that preaches tolerance but blacklists those who think differently. For decades, fans trusted Hanks as a safe haven, a reminder that Hollywood could still be human. But that trust cracked when he started talking down to the very people who built his career. He said Americans shouldn't walk away from cinema just because of politics. Yet for millions, it wasn't about politics at all. It was about fatigue, being lectured by millionaires who fly private jets to climate summits and still pretend to be the voice of the people. Every word he said felt rehearsed, polished, calculated. The kind of sincerity that only exists in PR meetings. And when the audience applauded, it sounded hollow, forced, like a standing ovation at a funeral. Tom Hanks didn't just give a speech that night. He gave the world a metaphor. The moment when Hollywood finally stopped pretending it understood its audience. Because what he saw as defending art, millions saw as defending arrogance. And that's when the conversation shifted, from one actor's meltdown to an entire culture's identity crisis. What started as one actor's outburst quickly turned into a mirror, reflecting everything wrong with modern Hollywood. Because Tom Hanks wasn't alone. He was just the latest voice in a choir that's been singing the same tired tune for years. If you don't agree with us, you're the problem. From award show podiums to late-night talk shows, the script never changes. Robert De Niro turns every interview into an anti-Trump sermon. Mark Ruffalo lectures fans about climate ethics from the backseat of a chauffeur-driven Tesla. George Clooney, the silver-haired diplomat of morality, tells Americans to lie to their spouses for the greater good of democracy. And every time someone calls them out, Hollywood claps louder, convinced that outrage equals relevance. But the audience isn't buying it anymore. Because beneath all the speeches and hashtags lies a simple truth. The movie industry has turned into a political campaign with better lighting. Scripts are rewritten to check ideological boxes. Casting calls read like manifestos. And if you dare to question it, you're done. Blacklisted. Replaced. Erased. Meanwhile, the industry that once united families on Friday nights now divides them at the dinner table. Every film carries a message, every award speech a hidden lecture. It's not entertainment anymore. It's indoctrination dressed up as inspiration. Even insiders are whispering it now. Producers, editors, writers who can't say it out loud. Hollywood doesn't create culture anymore. It manufactures consent. And Tom Hanks's meltdown wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom. A symptom of an empire more obsessed with preaching than performing. Because when art becomes propaganda, even the brightest stars start to fade. Next, we'll look at what happens when that empire begins to crumble. When studios that once printed money suddenly can't even break even. Welcome to the downfall. For decades, Hollywood was untouchable, the glittering cathedral of dreams. Every year, billions poured in from box offices, merchandise, and global fan worship. But now, that gold-plated empire is cracking. The lights are still bright, but behind the curtain, panic is setting in. Movie theaters are empty. Budgets are ballooning. Franchises that once guaranteed success now crash harder than ever. The Marvels, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Wish, all multi-million-dollar disasters. Even Disney, The fortress of fantasy is bleeding billions in streaming losses, and the same executives who mocked their audience are now begging them to come back. But here's the irony. The collapse isn't just financial. It's spiritual. When storytelling became secondary to messaging, something inside the audience broke. They stopped feeling, they stopped believing, because no amount of CGI can replace authenticity. Meanwhile, independent creators, once dismissed as amateurs, are thriving. Podcasts, YouTube documentaries, indie films. They're stealing the one thing Hollywood used to own: trust. Audiences no longer want polish, they want truth. They'd rather watch a shaky camera and an honest opinion than a glossy lie. And you can see the fear on Hollywood's face. When even loyal fans are walking away, when middle America stops buying tickets, when international markets shrug, it's not a boycott, it's evolution. Hollywood built an empire on illusion, but now the illusion is collapsing under its own ego. The box office isn't the only thing dying. It's the mythology of celebrity itself. Up next, we'll dive deeper, beyond the money, beyond the fame, into something far more haunting. What happens when the soul of cinema itself disappears, and all that's left is the echo of applause that no one believes anymore? There was a time when Hollywood wasn't a battleground, when stories carried hearts, not slogans. When you could walk into a theater, sit in the dark, and forget who you voted for. When the screen didn't divide, it healed. That was the magic. The shared silence of strangers breathing the same emotion. But somewhere along the way, that magic died. Tom Hanks said in his speech that cinema is supposed to unite us. He's right. But he forgot to mention who killed that unity. It wasn't the audience that changed first. It was Hollywood. It was the studios that turned art into activism. It was the writers' rooms that replaced humanity with agendas. It was the red carpets that became pulpits. You can feel it even in the movies now. The emptiness behind the smiles, the forced moral lessons, the plastic sincerity. Every premiere feels like a confession. Every Oscar speech sounds like a sermon. And every apology from an actor feels like a PR draft approved by a crisis team. People don't go to the movies for that. They go to remember what it means to feel human, to laugh, to cry, to escape. But how can you escape when the storytellers keep dragging you into their war? The saddest part isn't that Hollywood lost money, it's that it lost wonder. The ability to move us without manipulating us. The courage to tell a story without lecturing the audience. That's what people are mourning now. Not the industry, but the innocence it once gave them. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the echo. The last heartbeat of an art form gasping for air beneath the weight of its own virtue. Next, we'll explore what rises from those ashes. The new generation of creators who don't need permission to tell the truth anymore. From the ruins of Hollywood's broken stage, a new kind of storyteller has emerged. Not from Beverly Hills, not from the gated mansions of Malibu, but from bedrooms, garages, and basement studios around the world. Creators with a camera, a microphone, and something far more powerful than a PR budget. Authenticity. They don't need corporate approval. They don't wait for green lights from producers. They just hit record, and the world listens. It's not the red carpet crowd shaping culture anymore. It's the podcasters dissecting truth, the YouTubers exposing hypocrisy, the indie filmmakers reminding people that raw emotion beats digital perfection. when Hollywood laughed at them a decade ago. These creators built their own stage. Now, that stage is the internet, and the audience has followed them there. While studio executives spend millions crafting diversity statements, independent voices are gaining millions of subscribers. While actors cry on cue, real people are speaking from the gut. And guess what? Viewers can feel the difference. 'Cause honesty doesn't need lighting or sound design. It needs courage. And courage is contagious. Hollywood spent years convincing the world that fame equals truth. Now it's realizing that truth itself has become the new fame. From documentarians on YouTube to podcast hosts uncovering corruption, this new generation isn't bound by gatekeepers. They're rewriting the rules of entertainment, one upload at a time. And for the first time in decades, people are excited again. Not about sequels or reboots, but about voices. This is what scares Hollywood the most. Because power built on illusion can't survive when people stop believing in the illusion. Coming up next, what all this means for Tom Hanks, for the old guard, and for us, the audience that finally decided to take back the story. So here we are, at the end of a story that used to feel untouchable. Tom Hanks, the man once loved for his honesty, now stands as a symbol of Hollywood's greatest irony, preaching humility while drowning in self-importance. But maybe this was always where the script was heading, because every empire that forgets its audience eventually falls, not through hate, but through indifference. And indifference is louder than any boycott. Fans didn't walk away from Hollywood because they stopped caring about movies. They walked away because Hollywood stopped caring about them. It traded connection for control, emotion for messaging, and humility for applause. And when Hanks blamed that collapse on politics, he missed the truth staring right back at him. It wasn't politics that broke the bond. It was pride. But here's the silver lining. What's dying isn't storytelling. It's the monopoly over it. You can see it everywhere, in small YouTube channels, in independent films, in podcasts that dare to say what studios won't. The future of cinema isn't on Hollywood Boulevard. It's in every voice brave enough to speak without permission. So when Tom Hanks says the industry is under attack, maybe he's half right. It is under attack, but not from hate, from honesty, from audiences who no longer settle for scripts that insult their intelligence, from creators who remember why stories matter in the first place. Because in the end, movies were never about politics or power. They were about us, sitting in the dark, believing in something beautiful together. So, what do you think? Has Hollywood lost its soul, or can it still be saved? Comment below, share your take, and don't forget, your voice, not theirs, is what really matters.